Welcome back to AOM2316, and today is a continuation of our last lab. So today is construction day. We will be assembling, cutting the wood and assembling our COVID-19 hand washing station for agricultural purposes. And before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the cuts that we're going to make and some of the saw blades and stuff that we're going to use. So I got to thinking about it, and I just wanted to discuss exactly how we're going to cut this wood and how we're going to measure and a few things like that. So what I did was I sketched out. Actually, I traced a 2x4 to kind of look at exactly what we're going to be doing and some of the cuts that we're going to make first. So we're going to cut all of our lumber first, and then we're going to assemble this thing. So this is a 2x4 that I traced, and as you can see, this would be the end of the 2x4, the clean end of it. So this is a measure piece. I've already pulled a tape measure across, and I marked it. This red line here is the actual measured piece that we're going to use, that we'll actually use for the sink. And then over here I have the scrap piece of wood that we're not going to use. But I really wanted to talk about this part right in here. So this is where I made my mark and drew my line for the measured piece. But when I go to cut this, we're not going to cut right on this line, or we're not going to cut on this side of the line. If I take out my saw blade here, we're going to cut right next to the line on it. So my saw blade, or my circular saw that we're going to use, actually has a mark on it. It has a mark here, so we can actually see exactly where our cut's going to be made on our board. So we can actually watch that when we go to cut our wood. So this little gap here is important. So this little gap is the actual width of the saw blade, and that width is actually called a kerf. So what the kerf is the part of the wood that is going to be cut. So that's important, because that's why we don't cut directly on the line that we mark. If we cut directly on the line, we're going to lose about half of the width of this saw blade, and it would make our measured cut not an exact fit. So that's called the kerf. If we look back on our saw blade here, it actually says on here, it says thin kerf for fast cuts. So this is a relatively thin blade, but it's just important to know that when we go to make our cuts, we're going to cut just on this side of our line that we've marked to make sure that our cuts are accurate. So now I'll show you exactly how we're going to measure some of this wood, and we'll get to cutting. Alright, so now we're ready to measure and to start to make some cuts. So I have everything that we need right here, everything that we need to cut. So the first thing I'm going to start with is the top one, the 2x4. I'm going to cut it at 40 inches, and I need one piece of those. So I'll show you how we're gonna measure that, and then we'll start to make some cuts. So the first thing that we're going to need is we're going to need our pencil or pen or marking device, tape measure, and our speed square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out our tape measure to the end of our 2x4. I know that's a square cut on the end because it's a new 2x4. So I'm going to pull it out to 40 inches. Yep, right there. And I'm going to mark it. I'm going to mark it at 40 with my pencil, just right on the edge, as I can. Then I'm going to take the speed square, and if you notice, this speed square actually has a top catch plate on the top of it. So we're going to take that and we're going to put it next to our mark, so it'll catch right on the 2x4. I can slide it next to the mark where we need to be, and then I'm just going to draw a straight line down. And that's it. So this is the line that we're going to cut, and remember, we're not going to cut on that side of the line because this is our measured piece. We're not going to cut on the line, but we're going to cut just on the left side of this line with our saw. So now I'm going to make sure I have the correct new saw blades in the saw, and I'll put on the PPE, and we'll cut everything. Alright, I got my goggles on, got my gloves, got my ear protection. I've replaced the blade in the saw, so now we're ready to cut. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you're in the right position to cut. So you can see this board is a little tippy, but we're cutting, the first cut we're going to make is a 40-inch piece of it off, which is the short end of this board. So we're going to have the longer end of the board supported by these two sawhorses, this one here and the one you can't see in the frame. So we're set up. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to cut with my right hand, and I'm going to support this side of the board with my left hand. So as we get near the end of the cut, this board will kind of want to sag, so we're going to support it. I'll support it with my left hand. So we'll go ahead and get started. Line up on the mark where I want to be, support the board, and cut. Alright, so we made our first cut. As you can see, I supported the board, so this is 40 inches. I'll go ahead and we'll make the rest of the cuts. It's important, the one thing I didn't mention, it's important that you have your cuts exact. Working with construction and with lumber, unlike some other forms of construction, whether you're welding or using other types of materials, your cuts in construction have to be exact in order for everything to work. There's not a lot of fudge room for errors in this. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll cut the rest of we'll cut the 2x4s that we need. We'll cut the fence boards that we need, and then we'll go ahead and cut our used 4x4s to the lengths we need. Alright, so on to the 4x4. The 4x4 is going to be a little bit different because it's going to be 3.5 inches in both directions, and my saw blade isn't deep enough to cut it all the way through this. So we're going to have to cut it, I'll have to make 2 cuts for each leg. So we want these at 32 inches. This is probably the most agriculture construction thing that you'll learn. They're probably not going to teach you this in any real construction classes, so to speak. But this is, remember, this is the salvaged wood that I had. It's been broken on both ends. Some of the ends are a little rotten. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to try to find where the good wood starts. I'll make a mark there, then I'll make another mark of 32 inches, and then I'll cut both ends off, and I'll make 4 of these. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this fence staple that I've got, and we'll get started. Alright, now that we've got all of our pieces cut, we have our fence boards cut to 40 inches. We have all of our 2x4s that we need, and all 4 legs, or all the 4x4s that we cut at 32 inches. So now we're ready to assemble. Alright, now we're ready to assemble our COVID-19 hand washing station. And so the first thing that I wanted to do was put all of this on a flat surface, or on a hard surface, so that we can work. So we're going to be using some of the tools that we mentioned before. I'm going to use the speed square to make everything square in the corners. Also use our larger carpenter square to make sure that our legs are going to be square, and it's square all the way up. Of course, I'll use our tape measure again, and I'm going to use a drill, and with our star bits in it, because that's the bits we're using. We're going to fit in there like that. So I'm going to sink 2 screws at each connection point here. So we're going to build the base here first, and then we'll take a look at the top. But I'll use our drawings. Now that we have all the wood cut, everything that we went over in the last video, the little blueprint here, so to speak, I'm going to reference this in constructing it based on this and the measurements that we made. Alright, now that we're done with the construction of the base, now we need to mount the top. We're going to line these up, get it square, screw those down. Then we're going to take our sink, and now we're going to put it upside down. I'm going to measure to make sure it is where it needs to be on the top here, and then I'm going to trace this. So after we trace it, because then we need to cut out the shape of this sink so we can set the sink down into it. So we'll do that now. Alright, so what I've done here is the first thing that I did was I measured off, tried to find the center line, so I used the chalk line that we discussed in the last video. So I made a chalk line, I found the center of the table, and then I knew based on my drawing, which, over here. So based on my drawing, I know that I was going to be 2.5 inches. I wanted to be 2.5 inches from the front edge to the front lip of the sink here. So that's what I've done. This is the front side. So I measured 2.5 inches back on both sides and on the ends of the wood. And then I pulled the chalk line out, popped it to find the front edge, and then I measured the sink itself and found the center line. Marked that. It's a square, so I was able to mark 7.5 inches, 15 inches square, so 7.5 inches here, as well as on the back side. I lined up on the blue marks here, on the back and in the front on my side, and then lined up on the front edge, which I don't think you can see, but I lined up on the front edge of it, and then I traced it. So I traced the sink, pulled it off, so I have a nice outline of the sink. Now, if I were to cut this out, on this black line, exactly, this sink would fall through. So I had to come in a few inches, or I have to come in a little bit. I have to cut just on the inside of it. So if you notice on the sink here, this came out of a kitchen, and it has a metal, something metal here on the bottom side of it. So I can't cut too far into the wood. So I measured. I think I have about 1/4 inch. So what I'll do is I will, or what I did was I took the ruler and I measured 1/4 inch back off of all 4 sides, and I just drew a line on it. The corners I'm not as worried about because there is no metal thing to impede it. There you go. There's nothing there on the corners, so it should be able to lay flat. So what we'll do next is we're going to use the drill, and what I'm going to do is I will, this is a hole saw, so this is designed to drill a massive hole straight through this piece of wood. I need somewhere to start to cut, so I'm going to use this jigsaw. I put a new blade in it, a wood cutting blade, and I'm going to follow the inner line and cut this out, but I need a place to start. I can't start on the edge of the board, so I need to make a hole in this top wood here. So I'm going to use this drill I'm gonna drill a hole, and then that'll get me started with the jigsaw, and I can cut this out, and then hopefully the sink will slide in. If it doesn't, I might have to sand it, use the die grinder to clean up a few of the edges. Always remember, you can, I'll be a little conservative, so because once you cut wood, you can't put it back. So, and I definitely don't want the sink to fall through. So we'll do that now. Alright, now that we finished with the jigsaw, we can grab our sink and see if it fits in the hole. I know it's not exactly the cleanest cut, but you shouldn't be able to see any of that anyway. So if we put this down in there, and we have a nice flush seal in there, and it looks pretty good. We can kind of center it up on our old mark we made. And yeah, this is gonna work. So before we do anything with the sink, I'm gonna sand this down with the sander. I'm gonna use this 60 grit sandpaper. So it's a little bit coarse, but again, this being outdoors for agricultural use, it's gonna knock off any of the burrs, any of the splinters, and should give it a nice finish. And then what I'll do is I'm gonna apply our construction adhesive around the outside edge where the actual sink is going to mate with the surface of the wood and glue it on. But before I do that, I wanted to discuss a design flaw in this that, if you were savvy enough, you might have noticed. So since we cut out this piece here, and we use fence board, so it's not all one solid piece, a couple of the inner boards are now not supported on the inside of this, where the sink's gonna go. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab anything. I'm just gonna use a couple of 2x4s, and I'm going to brace the inner boards here. I'm just gonna mount it underneath where you can't see it, and use these other boards here to help support the inner board. And I'm gonna do that on either side. Then I'll sand it down. Then we'll glue the sink in, and then we'll be finished. Alright, so this completes the agricultural machinery lab on building a COVID sink. So thank you for watching. What I've done here is I went ahead and reinstalled the original fixtures that were on there. But what I'll probably do is take those out and put on more of a sensor oriented mechanism where the water comes on automatically. What we can do here, I haven't added any plumbing to it. We could hook up water. You could. This is actually going to go out into the field with live water, so I won't need a reservoir or anything like that. Underneath the sink, we could actually put in for drainage. We could either run it out to somewhere, or we could put a catch basin underneath there to catch all of the excess water. But anyway, so that's it. This is ready to go. We'll put this sink to the test. We'll put it out in the field, and we'll get ready for harvest. So I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.